Hi. The auditorium was packed that night. Not just with parents and siblings and folding programs. No, it was heavier than that. Filled with pride, tension, cameras flashing too early, whispers too loud. All of it buzzing in that particular frequency you only hear at elementary school recitals. There's something sacred about those nights, and maybe something a little desperate, too. Everyone's trying to hold on to something. Childhood, family, the illusion that everything's okay. I got there early, like I always did. Row D, center left. 3 seats. One for me, one for her, one for our daughter, Emily, to run into after she played. That was the tradition. After every performance, she'd find us, sweaty and flushed, violin in one hand, bow in the other, and collapse into whoever's arms were open first. That used to be mine. I texted her, "Hey, I'm here." Saved our usual seats. No reply. I wasn't surprised. Lately, her replies came late, or not at all. And when they came, they didn't sound like her. They were efficient, terse. Sometimes I wondered if someone else was typing them. That thought had started haunting me. But that night, I pushed it aside. It was Emily's night. Her first solo, Pachelbel's Canon in D. She'd been practicing for weeks. I'd heard it through the wall as I lay awake in the guest room. The recital began. The principal made his awkward jokes, thanked the PDA. Kids filed on stage in their white shirts and black pants. A few parents cried at the first off-key note. I watched the entrance, looking for her. And then, she walked in. But not alone. He was with her. Tall. Confident. A polished kind of casual. The kind of guy who always seems to know what to do with his hands. I recognized him, vaguely. From church, maybe. Or one of the volunteer things at school. He always hung back. The way people do when they're not quite part of a family, but close enough to touch one. She spotted me. Met my eyes for maybe half a second. No smile. No nod. Just a blink, and then she looked away. She walked right past the seat I saved. Past me. And sat 2 rows back. Next to him. I don't remember how long I stared. Maybe a minute. Maybe the whole first performance. I watched her lean into him, whisper something. He laughed. She laughed back. She hadn't laughed like that with me in months. Maybe longer. And suddenly, I realized something terrifying. That smile didn't belong to me anymore. Emily's name was next on the program. I stood up, craning to see if she'd noticed her mom. She hadn't. She was too busy tuning. Her little brow furrowed in focus, just like mine when I'm fixing something. That look used to make my wife laugh. She once said, "She's your carbon copy," even down to the concentration face. She used to say things like that. Now she sat 2 rows behind me, beside someone else, and pretended I wasn't even there. Emily stepped into the spotlight. Bow raised. The auditorium hushed. And then, music. Not perfect, but beautiful. The kind of music that aches in your chest because it's tied to too many memories. I watched her fingers move, her foot tap, her eyes lift slightly toward the light. And I felt it hit me in the gut that this was a moment we were supposed to share. Her mother and I. We were supposed to lock eyes across Emily's performance, mouths open in awe, hands touching without thinking. Instead, she clapped beside someone else, leaned into someone else. I couldn't even hear my own applause over the sound of what wasn't there anymore. When the performance ended, the room erupted. Cameras clicked. Parents beamed. Emily smiled so wide I thought her face might crack. She looked toward our row, and her mother waved. Stood. Motioned her over. To him. Emily hesitated. She looked at me, then back at her mom. Her smile wavered, just a flicker. But that flicker broke something in me. She walked toward them. I didn't follow. I just sat there. Alone. In the seat meant for someone who mattered. It wasn't the music that ended something that night. It was what came after. The empty chair next to me. The quiet where laughter used to be. The way our daughter's footsteps didn't lead her to me anymore. That was when I knew. The music ended. So did our marriage. I waited. Maybe I shouldn't have. Maybe I should have stood, should have waved, should have made myself visible to Emily. But I didn't. I stayed seated like some unwilling spectator in a life I used to be part of. It was like watching your own home from across the street, only to see someone else through the window, someone new pouring wine, someone else laughing with your child. She leaned down and hugged her mom first. That made sense. Of course it did. I reminded myself of that as I watched the moment. Then she turned to him. He bent to say something, low, close. She laughed. That broke me more than anything else that night. It wasn't just that he was there. It was how familiar they looked. How easy the three of them fit together. Like the kind of family photo that would get printed and hung on a fridge. That used to be mine. That space, that ease. I used to be the one who whispered jokes in the middle of recitals, who picked Emily up in one swoop, who held her hand while walking out to the car. I was the one who could make her laugh in that untamed, kid way. Now I was watching someone else do it. And my daughter didn't pull away. I left before the final curtain call. I walked out into the cold night, barely aware of the wind slicing through my coat. My hands trembled, not from the cold, but from everything I'd been holding inside for months. Maybe years. I sat in my car with the engine off, staring at the dashboard. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just sat in the silence. My phone buzzed. It was her. She wants to come with you tonight. I'll walk her to the lot. I stared at the message for a long time. No apology. No explanation. Just instructions. Just an assumption that I'd still play the role. 10 minutes later, I watched her silhouette approach through the windshield. Emily's coat hood was too big, like always, and she was clutching a little flower bouquet the music teacher had given her. My wife, ex-wife, in everything but paperwork, stayed behind, arms crossed, face unreadable. Emily climbed in and shut the door. She didn't speak at first. She just buckled her seatbelt, cradling the bouquet in her lap. I started the car. Halfway down the block, she said quietly, "Did you see me?" I did. Did I do okay? I nodded. "You were incredible." She smiled, but only for a second. He said I played like someone grown up. I knew who he was. I gripped the steering wheel a little tighter, but didn't say anything. It wasn't her fault. She didn't ask for this arrangement. This fracture she didn't cause. She was just caught between the walls that her parents kept quietly building. She spoke again, even quieter this time. "Why don't we sit together anymore?" It wasn't an accusation. It wasn't angry. Just a question from a child trying to understand why the world was rearranging itself. I didn't have the right answer. I had the honest one, but not the kind you give to a kid. Instead, I said, sometimes grown-ups make mistakes. And sometimes, they change in ways that don't match anymore. She nodded like she almost understood. "Do you still like Mommy?" I looked straight ahead, my voice thinner than I wanted it to be. "I'll always care about her. She gave me you." We pulled into the driveway. She reached over and grabbed my hand before I could get out. "I liked it better when you sat next to each other." I swallowed hard. "Me too, sweetheart." That night, after she fell asleep, I stood in her doorway longer than usual, just watching her breathe, one arm around her stuffed rabbit. The same rabbit I bought at that gas station the night she got the flu on a road trip. She was 3 then. Everything was different. We were different. I remember carrying her into a hotel room, her forehead burning, her breath shallow. My wife was pacing, frantic, and I told her, "It's gonna be okay." Back then, she believed me when I said that. Funny how years shift that. How belief erodes, slowly at first, then all at once. I went downstairs and poured a glass of water. I didn't turn on the lights. Just stood at the kitchen sink in the dark, listening to the quiet. My phone buzzed again. This time it was her. "I know tonight was weird. We should probably talk." I didn't reply, because I knew something she hadn't said out loud yet. But her seat choice had screamed it. We'd already talked. In 1,000 small, silent ways. In glances avoided. In beds slept in separately. In doors closed gently, but closed all the same. We were done. We just never said it. Not until now. The next morning, I didn't wake up to the sound of an alarm. Or a text. Or the clatter of pans like we used to on weekends when we made pancakes together as a family. I woke up to the sound of nothing. Emily was still asleep, and the house felt heavier than usual. I stood in the kitchen with coffee cooling in my hand and stared out the window at the gray sky. And I realized something. I hadn't been surprised last night. Not really. It hurt. Of course it hurt. But there hadn't been shock. No jolt of betrayal. That was the part that stuck with me. That I'd seen this coming from so far off. I'd already mourned it before it happened. We didn't fight much near the end. That's the dangerous kind of silence. The absence of conflict because the emotional muscle it takes to fight for something is already gone. Months ago, I used to rehearse the conversation in my head. The big one. The final one. But when it came, it didn't happen in fireworks or shouting matches. It happened in a recital seat. In the way her knees angled toward him. In the way she didn't save me a place beside her. That afternoon, after Emily went to her friend's house for a birthday party, I met my wife at a quiet cafe downtown. The kind of place we used to go when we first started dating. With tables, chalkboard menus, coffee that tasted like effort. She was already there when I arrived. Not dressed up, but not casual either. Somewhere in between, like she was undecided. We didn't order right away. She stirred her tea without sipping it. I finally said, "I saw the way you looked at him." She nodded. Didn't deny it. Didn't offer excuses. Just said, "I didn't mean for it to happen like this." I believed her. And I also believed she'd stopped meaning for anything to happen with me a long time ago. "I'm not angry," I said. And I wasn't. Not in that moment. Not anymore. Just tired. But I can't keep pretending. She looked out the window, blinking fast. Neither can I. The silence between us wasn't cold. It was tired. Like two people who'd been carrying something for too long and finally set it down. We talked logistics, custody, finances. I offered her the house. She didn't argue. She offered me more time with Emily than I expected. I didn't argue either. When the waitress came by, we both shook our heads and left the table untouched. Out on the sidewalk, she hugged herself against the breeze. She's going to have questions. She already does. She nodded, eyes softening. "You're a good dad." That landed harder than I expected. Not because of the compliment, but because for the first time in a long time, it felt like she meant it. "I hope he makes you laugh," I said, almost gently. "He does," she replied. "But not the way you did." And that was the last truth we shared. I walked away first. Not with bitterness. Not with triumph. Just clarity. In the weeks that followed, there were papers, signatures, boxes, schedules, the kind of stuff that makes endings feel mundane. But the real ending had already happened, quietly, under dim stage lights, as Canon and D played through a tinny speaker system and my daughter looked for someone to run to. It ended when the seat beside me stayed empty. It ended without drama, without yelling, without slamming doors. Just a look, a silence, a choice. I still go to every one of Emily's recitals. I clap too loud. I bring her flowers every time. I sit in the same row, row D, center left. It's not ours anymore. It's just mine. And when she runs into my arms afterward, I hold her tighter than I ever did before. Because sometimes, what's broken doesn't need to be fixed. It just needs to be let go. The music ended. But in the silence after, I found myself again. Bye-bye.